Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maura Keefe. I'm one of the scholars in residence, and it's my privilege to be able to moderate a brief conversation with Michael Novak, whom you met at the top of the show, artistic director, and Cathy McCann, who is a rehearsal director for the company. Thank you both for being here.
Of course.
And if you can feel free to fill in and move closer, and you're not hurting our feelings if you also want to go out into the new rain that just started, I'm just saying. So the first thing mostly we're going to talk about what we just saw, but I think it seems really important, especially for the two of you and the legacy of this company, to hear about your pillow origin story. So maybe, Cathy, I will ask you to start first.
Okay.
If you could say something about when you came here first and what your relationship was with the company.
I came here first as ballet faculty right out of college, 1976. And I taught here for 3 summers. The school was structured differently than it is now. I was teaching the intermediate ballet classes. And it was a wonderful time. As a teacher, I got to see every performance. So I got exposed to so many companies that I hadn't been exposed to, that nobody had been exposed to. The Pillow was bringing in people, New York local people, but also, people from around the world, and different kind. Annabelle Gamson, who did Isadora Duncan, and Bill Irwin, who was doing like mime, and it just really, I got exposed to so many different things. And it's where I first saw the Taylor Company perform. And I fell in love. I thought, these women are beautiful and elegant and sensual, but also strong and athletic. And I fell in love with the company. I was here for 3 years teaching. And then I got into the Taylor Company the next year when I was 24. And then I was back many times performing here on stage, and now I'm back with the company as a rehearsal director. So I have had 50 years of Jacob's Pillow, and it's fabulous. Yeah.
Michael, how about you? When was the first time you were at the Pillow?
First time I was here was in 2017. I joined the company in 2010. And when you get into a company of this stature, there are so many venues kind of within the dance lexicon that to go there is kind of like you made it. Like I finally, oh my God, I'm a dancer. And the Pillow was that. It was one of the last major boxes that I wanted to check. And we did airs, Syzygy, and Esplanade. And I remember I was in Syzygy, and you can't do this now, but backstage, there's this like little balcony, and we like snuck up there, and we watched the entire company from up there. And it's just being here. I'm a bit of a dance history nerd, for those of you that might not know. So it's not just an incredible venue with an incredible history, but like the archive, and this is a home of American modern dance. This is like the ancestors were here. So being here for me was more than a venue. It's like, this is home in a very powerful way.
We're so glad you're back, and I was thinking about questions about Reconstruction and the surprise reconstruction we had this afternoon from the documentary that you've all seen, probably called Dance Maker, where in the documentary the sound goes out for a moment and the dancers power on and they're beautifully in sync. I felt like we got a little wink from Paul from heaven.
Shorter one.
Yeah, much shorter one, yeah. So could you say something about kind of the nature of live performance and how you have to be at the ready for things that are a surprise like that?
Oh, things happen all the time.
Yeah.
Music will sometimes go out. You hope these things don't happen, but like lights, sometimes things in the outside world happen, and nothing creates live music. Things can happen with live music. There's an amazing thing that happens when you're with a company and you know the repertoire so well, and something happens, some variable, is brought into play, and how all of you start, you're not saying a single word, but you're all communicating, whether it's through your breath, through how you're looking at each other. Like, it's amazing how like the hive mindset of like, here's what we're gonna do. And it happens in a second. And how resilience comes out of that, and you just keep integrity with the art, knowing that your team is behind you in that moment a breakthrough is going to happen, and it's all going to be fine.
It was beautiful. There were some extra smiles, I thought, in that moment. I wanted to ask you, Cathy, about Brandenburgs, because you were in the original cast of that, and I was thinking about the way dances are reconstructed. Sometimes we only use video, and that people learn it from that, and then they might get some coaching. But I was wondering about kind of the oral history component in coaching this work, and like the stories that you might have shared with the dancers and working on Brandenburgs in particular.
Yeah, it was wonderful for me to be able to work with the current dancers on that piece because I was in the original cast. The structure of it was the 3 women soloists were his senior women, and he kind of zoned in or tapped into each of how he saw our unique qualities as movers. And then the male soloist was our senior male in the company. And then the core were the newer men in the company. So there really was a hierarchy. And so I was able to talk, demonstrate to some extent, but talk about the individual qualities that Paul was looking for example, in the solos, and the buoyant kind of athletic energy that the core men, all the men who were new to the company, were bringing, like young puppies, so eagerly running around the stage and jumping. And so it's wonderful and we're doing it now when we reconstruct dances, perhaps that I'm not as aware of, they happened after me. If it's possible, we'll invite a dancer who was original cast, because there are things that they can say and mention and suggest that you just don't get on a screen, little details and nuances. So
the other dance I want to ask about in that regard is Esplanade, the final piece on the program, and I was so struck by, in my years of loving this dance, how in some ways it must be terrifying for new members of the company because it's a signature work. Maybe they grew up seeing it, but also there's you're sliding, you're flying through the air, you're hoping that somebody's there to catch you. And could you talk a little bit about how you coach them to abandon?
It's interesting. I never felt afraid to do Esplanade. I remember there's definitely a rite of passage where I feel like you're like, oh my God, I'm dancing Esplanade. But there are other dances of Paul's where I would say the feeling is fear. That there's it's like driving thing. You're like, oh, okay, this is going to happen. There's something about the current of Bach, I think, and this is true in all of Paul's pieces to Bach, that there's like this weird artistic confidence that comes from how Paul crafts his movement to that music that kind of pushes you. It feels so inevitable that that's the movement that has to happen at that time. There's no other option. And so that creates this odd, quick familiarity with it. The fifth section, obviously, there is a way to fall to the ground and slide. And you learn that. We get a lot of raspberries, they call them, like when you land on your, but then there's that short, and it's a short window. Once you learn how to fall like that, the risk becomes fun, and there's a play that happens, and everyone's smiling because it's just exhilarating as heck, And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I want to jump higher, and I want to slide farther. Oh, wait, I'm going to go, and you start to push it, and then you're all pushing it, and it just builds from there. And that's Paul just kind of giving you the material to play with.
I was thinking about what you said at your opening remarks about them being true collaborators, Bach and Taylor, and part of it feels inevitable, is what you're saying, because it's so beautifully crafted. But not all dancers hear music in the same way. And could you talk a little bit about the process of working with them to be able to understand, because it's also so different than when they're dancing to the Andrews Sisters, but still that attention. Could you talk about that in the rehearsal process?
Yeah, the Andrews Sisters in particular, I hear the voice as another instrument. And so if there's a gesture or a reach or a balance or something, I'm asking the dancers to listen, really listen. And yes, it's on count 4, but listen to how long their voices stretch or pull, or the quality with which they say a word, and your leg can kind of go and mimic that, and to use that. With Bach, you know, there are so many little notes and half notes and stuff like that. And so it's like a mathematical, I don't know, task that you get the fast rhythm and, you know, you work on it. It takes work.
So a thing that I also think is really interesting, and I'm not sure that people necessarily, they notice, they don't know that they've noticed. In the middle piece, there's a change of floor. We have the black marley in the first and third piece, and then it's a white or gray marley in the middle piece. Could you say something about why it was important to Paul, and in collaboration with the designers, to make that choice? Because it reads very differently, but I'm not sure the audience necessarily understands, well, the backstage labor, A, but also why it would be so important visually.
It is a design element, and it creates a very different mood and feeling. And we use white floors quite frequently. We have 1 or 2 pieces on gray floors that are more contemporary, and we have one that I believe is like a bright blue. It's an Alex Katz piece. But what I love about a white floor is it kind of creates, so Paul was a painter before he was a dancer and choreographer, and he also worked in window displays. And so what the white floor, I think, does against the black wings is it kind of creates this little like you walk by Tiffany's, you know, or Cartier, and you see those like little like boxes where the jewel is, right? The white floor, the gray floor, kind of creates this little nook in which the gem is. And I think that's one thing that a white floor does. But it also reflects light up. So you're being illuminated as an artist in a very different way when there's a white floor. And the black floor with the black drop, like you saw in Brandenburgs and Esplanade, the costumes and the movement of the fabric, like in Brandenburgs, tend to punch out because you have that absence of anything so that your eye focuses on different things.
Yeah, this is my thought, but also, if you can recall, the beginning of the dance and the end of the dancers are moving very slowly. They're like ghosts. They have passed on. And then it's somewhere in the middle of the first section, they come alive, and we're witnessing this, all these different sections that happened in the past. And then they go back to fading and walking, kind of ghost-like. So it's like the piece is bookended with people that kind of ghost figures that come alive, and here's our memory, and then they go back into being in our memory or ghosts. And so I think, you know, you can say heaven or I don't know what, in the clouds, you know, the whole white thing is part of that, I think, design, or that's how I see it.
And so is that a kind of thing that you might talk to a dancer about? I mean, they're thinking about steps, and I'm paying attention, but also about that atmosphere.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, none of us is going to tell your answer to this question. It's just between us. Favorite dance to watch, favorite dance to do. Just from the ones today. That's all we can talk about.
Favorite? It depends on what I need. I think we were in Italy somewhere. So favorite dance to watch, I'd say Brandenburgs. We were in Italy, and there are cameras in stages, so production can call things and stuff like that. We were in one theater in Italy, and there was a camera directly over center stage, like bird's eye view, directly over. And I remember being backstage, and I've seen Brandenburgs from different angles and stuff like that. I've never seen Brandenburgs from above, and I remember watching it from above, and it was one of the most glorious architectural, I have no words. Sacred geometry you might have heard of, but like just the pattern work, it was just unbelievable. And then Esplanade to dance, I like to say one lives a full life in those 30 minutes as a dancer. You experience everything. You experience joy, loss, romance, exhilaration, abandonment. It's all in there. And by the time that dance is over, it's just, you've lived in a really, really profound way.
Yes and yes. Yeah. Even now, like today, I'm sitting in the house watching Brandenburgs, and I'm forcing myself, because Paul will direct your eye. Whether you realize it or not, he's kind of telling you where to look. And I'm forcing myself to look at the other people, because there is such pattern work that goes on, and I want to check and make sure that it's all, happening the way it is supposed to. But I'm always amazed. In Esplanade too, the pattern work in the first section, it's phenomenal what he has done.
I knew it was like one of those ridiculous questions of like, because just since you've been here, since when me seeing dress rehearsal, I've changed my mind every time about which one is my favorite to watch. I'm saying this because you put out there that you're a dance history aficionado. I want to at the request of Pam Tadji, I'm inviting all of us now to go to Blake's Barn, where the reception on the opening of the exhibition on Martha Graham, one of the great figures in both Paul Taylor's history, but also the history of the pillow and modern dance. The opening reception is happening right now. So thank you so much for bringing this glorious work. Tell your friends. They got some more shows to do here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Go see the exhibit.